For Canadian history, the heroes really of the war were the everyday Canadian soldiers who went and fought. There were approximately 425,000 who saw active service, and a small portion of their records are documented here. My name is Bridget Whittle. I work in McMaster University's Archives and Research Collections. We're fortunate to have a broad range of World War I and World War II archives here. Starting sort of in the First World War, Bernard Freeman Trotter was born in 1890. He went and did his undergrad at McMaster University and was then carrying on to become a professor when he signed up for the war. He was an avid poet. He was the editor of the McMaster University Monthly, which eventually became the Marmor. And he wrote letters home full of his poetry and thoughts on the war. He is considered by many to be Canada's Rupert Graves, and some of his best work came from during the war. He sort of represents in a lot of ways the tragedy and the difficulty in how many people coped using art and correspondence home. He transferred to the British Imperial Army in December of 1916 and then was unfortunately killed shortly thereafter in April 1917. William Windridge was a First World War soldier. He was with the Canadian Pioneers. They would have dug trenches and also served as infantry. His collection is really interesting. It actually doesn't have a lot of letters and other documents other than a few things like his discharge papers, his pay book. But it had a lot of objects. His medals from the First World War, and he actually served again in the Second World War. He volunteered as a clerk. And so all of his things came in a small box mostly. But the best thing was this. It was a little matchbook case, and he's carefully carved in from the First World War his number, his name and regiment, and on the back, Nouvelle Saint-Vaast, 1917, which was just near Vimy Ridge. And he'd probably been there, digging trenches, helping with the infantry, and fought one of the major Canadian battles there. And inside the case is this little matchbox, which for even it to have survived is incredible. The ends are quite dented in. He's used it a lot. But the best part is what's inside. And he had this little tiny dog that maybe he carved, maybe he got. It's hard to know, and unfortunately we don't have the documents to say. But you can just imagine him keeping this in a pocket, keeping it close as his little good luck charm, as the thing that got him through first one war and then another as he served his country. Then we have Stuart Ivison, who was also a McMaster alumni. He was born in 1906, so was only about 10 or so when the First World War started. But when the Second World War started, he volunteered his services as a chaplain in the war. In some ways, by providing the hope to so many of the soldiers who were there, being there with them, he really embodied a lot of hope and energy for them. And soldiers used to leave him things before they went to fight or talk to him about their worries and fears. He was stationed towards the end of the war with Patricia's Light Infantry. He had got a note from headquarters, Army headquarters, saying that he was supposed to come up for a meeting. And he looked at it and then saw that the orders for the Princess Pat's were a difficult river crossing, intense battle scenario, and he said he couldn't, in all good conscience, sneak off and while they were doing this. And so he stayed and went over for this, and then was even there the day after supervising the digging of graves to make sure that everyone was buried who died in the attack, taking cover in those half-dug graves as the enemy shelled. And when he returned, he discovered that it wasn't just some meeting at headquarters he was avoiding, but that he'd been transferred to Army headquarters, been promoted to a major, and had he died at the front, he wasn't even supposed to have been there, but it was so important to him to stay with the regiment that he was sort of providing this hope and support to, that he couldn't leave. And so he stayed, and he felt that even had he died, it wouldn't have been a loss, that it was the right thing to have done. This is really what embodies the spirit of all of the Canadians who served. This desire to do what was right despite it being hard and terrifying and horrific, and they got through in the best ways that they could, whether through poetry or little good luck charms, or through being the support for everyone else and writing home and keeping those people close.
Thank you for joining us today to celebrate Remembrance Day. As we are distanced from each other during this service, we are remembering our alumni who rode home from the other side of the Atlantic during the wars of the 20th century. We have often included in our remembrance service the words of Bernard Freeman Trotter. He was a member of the McMaster class of 1915, a published and promising poet. He was 26 years old when he was killed in France in 1917. In April of 1916, Bernard wrote home, and in his letter, he noted that half of his company was in quarantine for measles. We were immediately turned out, he wrote, and put under canvas in the enclosure of the medical inspection office. He ended that part of his letter optimistically, writing, "No doubt it will all come out right in the end." Over 100 years later, we are all living in our own version of quarantine, and Bernard Trotter's words serve as inspiration to all of us. They speak of resilience, hopefulness, and confidence, and of putting aside personal discomfort and even danger for the larger cause. Every year at this service, we pay tribute to the McMaster alumni named on the honor roll. The honor roll is a permanent part of our campus, and it can be found at the entrance to Alumni Memorial Hall. I encourage you to visit the hall when it's safe to do so, and to spend a few minutes reflecting on the service and sacrifice of our former students. Let me tell you about a few of the names on that list. William K. Anderson of the McMaster class of 1914 was known as K to his friends. He was studying law when he became an artillery observer in the Royal Flying Corps. His service included 7 months on the front at Somme. He died in a training accident when he was pursuing his pilot's course. He was 25 years old. Stanley Housen Brocklebank was a classmate of Anderson's. Stanley was a captain in the Canadian Infantry who served in some of the most gruesome battles in history, the Somme, Passchendaele, and Vimy. He was wounded 4 times. He died of his injuries 2 months before the end of the war and was awarded a posthumous military cross. Lieutenant John Andrew Dow Elder enlisted before he could graduate with his classmates in the McMaster class of 1917. He was twice offered field promotion to the rank of captain, but declined to remain with his company. He was killed on October the 30th, 1918, but the news did not reach home until November the 12th, the day the war ended. I hope these stories have added some depth to our reflections here today. On behalf of McMaster University and the McMaster Alumni Association, thank you for joining us in remembrance to honor our former students who sacrificed so much for our country.
Students, faculty, distinguished guests, and friends, good morning. As a proud McMaster alumnus, I'm joining you today from home and want to discuss the importance of remembering as well as reflecting on Remembrance Day itself. While this year has brought some unique challenges, we're still able to come together today and remember the sacrifices made by those who have served. Today in particular, we recognize the efforts of all those who have given their lives in the service to a greater good. We can clearly see parallels between those on the battlefields of Europe and our brave frontline medical professionals who are battling the COVID-19 pandemic. Bravery, a desire to help others, and a belief in a better tomorrow are what brought Canadians together during wartime. I hope that we're able to similarly embrace those traits today. In my service with the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders of Canada, I've had the unique privilege of being able to meet people hailing from everywhere between Victoria and St. John's. Regardless of where we come from, the challenges we face, and the problems that we are working to solve, I know that the Canadian Armed Forces is truly representative of the fabric that makes Canada the great place that it is today. I also acknowledge that more work needs to be done to improve not only our organization, but to make society more equitable and to ensure the maintenance of a lasting peace for all. There's a question that I all want you to consider. What does remembrance really mean to you? Is it a school assembly, a pause at your workplace, a poppy, a memory? For me, I see the loss and the pain felt by my colleagues. I think back to the generations of family and friends who've served in the First World War, in the Second World War, Korea, on UN missions, and during the conflict in Afghanistan. I also take time to give thanks for being able to express myself the way that I want to have the freedom to choose what is best for my life, and to be able to live in a country that values democracy, freedom, liberty, and the ability to enjoy life to the fullest. I urge you to take time today and think about what you are thankful for, what you may have to work on, as well as what we can do together to make the world a better place. Together, we will remember them. We will build a brighter future, lest we forget.
(1914 to 1918). Henry Harold Allen, William K. Anderson, Stanley Howson Brocklebank, William Alexander Chisholm, R. W. Ewart Christie, John Andrew Dow Elder, John Harris Fairchild, Alman Minor Froome, Charles Arnold Grant, William Ernst Hinson, David Hughes, Wilford John Jones, Robert Charles Kerr, Clarence Mackenzie, Harold Grant Masson, Wilfred Earl McKissock, Archie Alexander Morrow, William Sidney Rice, Roy Clark Steckley, Bernard Freeman Trotter, William Jonathan Wright. 1939 to 1945. Kenner S. Arell, Murray A. Benito, Nairn S. Boyd, Robert E. Dorsey, Robert J. Edgar, Stanley D. Godin, Stephen G. Goatley, Robert D. Hurd, John G. Hemrick, Roy H. Hillgartner, William D. W. Hilton, Gordon R. Holder, Charles M. Holman, Francis J. Jensen, Richard G. Kelley, Charles W. MacDonald, George E. Matchett, Albert H. Milden, Albert E. McCreery, William E. McKeon, Donald R. McLean, Ruthin C. McNairn, Henry J. Novak, Thomas H. O'Neill, Byron N. F. Rawson, J. Gordon Sloan, Charles L. Zelimsky, Robert L. Telfer, Edmond McLeod Tew, Fredrick E. Wellington, John W. Yost, James A. Young, J. Douglas Young, Harry G. Zavadowsky, Franklin Z. Zubrick, The Afghanistan Mission, Richard Leary, Raymond Mark Ruckpaul.
Easy Repose by Bernard Freeman Trotter, McMaster Class of 1915. This was Bernard's last poem, the manuscript of which reached his parents the day after he was killed on May the 7th, 1917. O happy dead, who sleep embalmed in glory, safe from corruption, purified by fire. Ask you our pity? Ours, mud-grimed and gory. Who still must grimly strive, grimly desire? You have outrun the reach of our endeavor, have flown beyond our most exalted quest. Who prate of faith and freedom, knowing ever that all we really fight for is just a rest. The rest that only victory can bring us, or death, which throws us brother-like by you. The civil commonplace in which 'twill fling us to neutralize our then too martial hue. But you have rest from every tribulation. Even in the midst of war, you sleep serene, pinnacled on the sorrow of a nation, in cerements of sacrificial sheen. Oblivion cannot claim you, our heroic, war-lustered moment, as our youth will pass to swell the dusty horde of time the stoic, that gathers cobwebs in the nether glass. We shall grow old and tainted with the rotten effluvia of the peace we fought to win. The bright deeds of our youth will be forgotten, effaced by later failure, sloth, or sin. But you have conquered time and sleep forever. Like gods with a white halo on your brows, your souls our lodestars, your death-crowned endeavor, the spur that holds the nations to their vows.
Sego, Skanagoa, Santi Smith de Glunyakwa, Nyungyats Gongwaihoe Ganyangahaga, Six Nations of the Grand River. As Chancellor of McMaster University and on behalf of MAC, I offer my greetings to you. Nyawe, thank you for sharing this important day with us as we remember and pay homage to veterans and their families. Today, we acknowledge the sacrifices many brave individuals made over the years in the line of duty to this land, known as Canada, and to our nations. Today, with arms linked together, we remember. We are 102 years removed from the end of the Great War, the event that inspired the creation of Remembrance Day. There are no more surviving combatants from that war, and in Canada, we have fewer and fewer direct personal connections to the First and Second World Wars, the two wars that played defining roles in the progress of our nations, two wars that influenced the path of our university, and the two wars reflected in the names on the McMaster Honor Roll. So why do we continue to mark this day? Why do we remain so steadfast in honoring service and sacrifice every November 11th? It's in the remembering we can access stories, histories, connections, which are as informative and meaningful today as they were a century ago. And if we look closely, we know our need for harmonious connections are as vital as ever. Many of us are interconnected through our ancestors who served in the great conflicts of the 20th century. For me, this is the day that I feel the presence and I honor my grandfathers on both sides of my Gayangahaga lineage. I would like to acknowledge and share a little bit about my great-grandfather, Alexander George Smith. A Gayangahaga leader and warrior, he was born on Six Nations of the Grand River in 1880. He voluntarily enlisted to fight in the Great War on the very first day possible, November 13th, 1914. He joined the 20th Battalion of the Canadian Expeditionary Force almost exactly 106 years ago today. He already had military experience, so he was commissioned as a lieutenant and served in some of the most devastating and historic battles in Canadian history. In fact, in 1916, he was a part of the Second Allied Assault on the Somme. In that single action, more than 1/3 of the 1,200 men battalion were injured, including my great-grandfather. Among the 111 killed was Cameron Brant, the great-great-grandson of the legendary Gayangahaga leader, Joseph Brant. On the second day of the assault, my great-grandfather was already wounded, but still, he proceeded with a party of bombers and captured an enemy trench and 50 prisoners, displaying the greatest courage throughout. He was twice buried by shells, but stuck to his post. That last passage was a quote from the citation he received when he was awarded the Military Cross for conspicuous gallantry in action. It was the highest individual service medal earned by a First Nations warrior soldier during the Great War. The honor is all the more special, both historically and familially, because Charles Smith, my great-grandfather's little brother, also earned the Military Cross. Having been evacuated to England to recover, A.G. wrote to his father, "You may tell Mabel," my great-grandmother, his wife, "that I was awarded the Military Cross for bravery and gallantry on the field of the greatest battle the world has ever known." And on September 15, 1916, he wrote to his sister to describe the heroism he had witnessed at the front. "Oh, but the people at home should be proud of these lads. Some they may never see again, but they should know that these noble lads gave their lives freely, all for Canada, England, and the Empire. The world never knew there were such men as the Canadians, men in the truest sense of the word." Lieutenant A.G. Smith was promoted to captain, but his service on the front lines ended with a significant illness in April 1917. So he returned to Canada, where he trained new soldiers at a camp in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Many of his trainees were of Polish descent, and after the war, my great-grandfather became an officer of the Order of the Black Star, a Polish honor presented to just 5 Canadians. My ancestral narrative is a part of my connection to our Remembrance Day service, but like so many others, it's the personal stories that open windows to so much more. I invite you to reflect on your own family history, the history of this land, and to learn about and examine the forces and circumstances of politics, treaty making, relationship to land and family, and the history that shaped our country during times of war and now during a time of relative peace, yet we know with societal challenges new and ongoing. These windows are opportunities for understanding and to put into action positive intentions to better sustain a more peaceful society. For me, when I look back at the remarkable voluntary service of thousands of Indigenous veterans in conflicts from the War of 1812 to more contemporary service, I see the covenant chain of peace as a shining beacon, a defining nation-to-nation alliance between Canada and the Haudenosaunee. The Covenant Chain Belt is one of the earliest treaties between the Crown and First Nations. The links of the chain represent a covenant of friendship, good minds, and the peace which shall remain between us. Significantly, the covenant chain is made of silver, symbolizing that the relationship must be polished from time to time to keep it from tarnishing, to renew it, to preserve it strong and bright. The use of the word chain in the description of this treaty is, of course, symbolic in the way that you might expect, that the chain links 2 parties. But the word chain is also a translation. It is a translation into English of an expression in Haudenosaunee language that means arms linked together. It is the embodiment of that image and a show of action or state of being. And fundamentally, the link to the chain is the understanding by both Haudenosaunee and the Crown that the chain would only help maintain peace if the 2 parties worked for mutual benefit and if they provided mutual support in times of crisis. And so, in the Crown's times of greatest crises, in times of war, men like my great-grandfather, Captain A.G. Smith, volunteered to link their arms together with people from other cultures throughout the British Commonwealth and the Allied nations. And they fought, and many of them gave the ultimate sacrifice, their lives. The Covenant Chain of Peace, the precursor to the Turo Wampum, is about mutual responsibilities. And McMaster's Remembrance Day service provides an annual occasion that should inspire us all to consider our mutual responsibilities, especially to the people who serve and have served on our behalf. We are reminded that the renewal of peace is an ongoing action. The men whose names you heard read aloud from the McMaster Honor Roll, along with thousands of other individuals who served, returned home, and others who continue to serve today, uphold an impressive responsibility as selfless, active warriors on behalf of the ideals of what our nations value most. So today is a time to remember what they gave and also what we must give in return. It is our shared responsibility to build a society capable of sustaining peace, equity, and justice for all. Bringing our minds and hearts together, we take a small step towards that goal, considering our place in history and remembering the sacrifices of our ancestors who made it possible for us to be here in this moment. Today, let's stand with our arms linked together as we remember. Nyawe.